Hi, I'm Sophie from Encodian, and today I'm going to be showing you how you can insert headers and footers into documents, how you can enable tracked changes for documents, how you can then go ahead and automatically accept any changes in a document, and how you can disable those tracked changes too. So let's take a look at the solution. So this is my SharePoint site. So I have a different folder for each client I work with. And that means I can come through into SharePoint and create online documents here. And this means me and my team can collaborate on the online document, and it means that there's only one source of the document being stored in this client folder. We're working with Word documents in the scenario today, so I'm going to come through to the blue button here and create a new Word document. When the document is created, this fires off the first Power Automate flow being used in the backend. So this flow is going to automatically insert headers and footers into the document and is going to automatically turn on tracked changes to the document, just making it easier for collaboration on the document. So let's have a look at what this looks like. So we can see we've got the header, the footer, and tracked changes enabled. So I'm just going to go ahead and make a change to the document. And I'm going to go and close this down. So once the document has been finished and everyone has had their input, I have this ready for approval column here. Now this is a custom column that's been added into the SharePoint library. It's a yes/no column and it allows me to submit my document for approval. So I'm going to come through here, click the ellipsis, and just change that ready for approval to yes. Once this has been set to yes, it's going to trigger off a second Power Automate in the background, and this is going to send this document through an approvals process. If the document is approved, all of the changes are going to be accepted, tracking is going to be turned off, and we're going to see approved appear in this approval status column. So this is another custom column in this document library, and the options are approved or rejected. So we can see this document here has already been approved. If the document in the approvals process is rejected, we're going to see rejected appear in the approval status column, and ready for approval is going to be set back to no, and track changes are going to stay turned on because changes are going to need to take place in the document, and we're going to set ready for approval back to no because this allows the document to be resubmitted once those new changes have been completed. So let's have a look and see what this approval looks like in Outlook. So my approval email has just come through. So I'm just going to go ahead here and click approve. Once the document has been approved, we can see that a second email has come through, just confirming the status of the document. And if we come back to SharePoint now, we can see that the approval status has now changed to approved. So let's actually open up this document and have a look at what it looks like. So we can see that the changes have been accepted. The formatting of this is correct, as you would expect. And just to confirm that the track changes have been turned off, we can see here that they're switched to off. So that's the solution. Let's have a look at the Power Automates that are running in the background. So this is the first Power Automate, and this is the Power Automate that inserts the headers and footers and enables the tracked changes to the document. So the trigger that I'm using is when a file is created. So I'm pointing it to the correct site address and the correct library. I'm not pointing it to a specific folder because there's going to be many different folders where this is going to apply. I've got a trigger condition set up in the settings of the trigger because we only want this flow to trigger if the document that's being created is a Word document, because the actions that we're using for this solution are specific to Word. So if someone creates a PowerPoint file, we don't want this flow to run because it will then fail. So I can do this by looking at the end of the file name with extension, because a Word document will end in docx. Once the flow has triggered, we can then go ahead and get the file content using the full path provided from the trigger. And we can then use Encodian Flowr to add headers and footers into the Word document. The headers and footers need to be provided in HTML format with inline CSS styling, and you can add dynamic content as well into the HTML. So we can see here that I've added the name of the document into my header. There are also more options with this action where you can specify what pages you want the headers and footers to be applied to. So whether it's just the first pages, even pages, or odd pages. However, I want my headers and footers on all pages, so I'm going to leave these blank. Once the headers and footers have been added, we can then go ahead and enable tracked changes. So for this, we need to provide the file name with extension, and the file content is the output of the Flowr action above. And finally, for this flow, we need to update the file back into SharePoint. So for this, we're using the identifier from the trigger, and the file content here is the file content from the enable tracked changes Flowr action. So this is the first flow. Let's have a look at the second. So this is my second Power Automate flow. So my trigger for this flow is when an item or a file is modified, because if you remember, the flow gets fired when that ready for approval column gets set to yes. I also have a trigger condition working here. We need to add this trigger condition to stop a recurring loop from happening. So this means the flow will only fire if the ready for approval column is set to yes, and if the approval status column is not set to approved. So we want to stop documents that have already been approved refiring, and we need to add this measure in because we're going to be re-updating the file further down the line in the flow. So once the flow has fired, we then need to get the file content, again using the identifier from the trigger. Once we have the file content, we can then start the approval process. So I'm using inbuilt Power Automate approvals today, and I've just got a simple approval here where I'm providing the details with the document name, and I'm providing a link to the document in SharePoint, so the approver can just click on the link and be taken straight to the item. When using inbuilt approvals, you do also have the option to be able to add your documents as attachments if you prefer. I then need to check the outcome of the approval to see whether it's equal to approved. If the document has been approved, I'm going to go down the yes branch here. So the first step here is to actually manage the tracked changes and accept all of the changes that have been made. And I'm also going to be removing the comments in the document too. So we need to make sure that we accept the changes before disabling the tracking, because if we don't, the revisions are still going to be in the document and the formatting just isn't going to be correct. So we need to accept all changes before we turn off the tracking. Once that's been done, we can then go ahead and use disable tracked changes, and the file content here is going to be the output of the manage tracked changes action. And both of these actions need the file name with extension when you're using them because they only work with Word documents. Once we've turned off the tracked changes, we need to then update the file in SharePoint. So we're going to be updating it with the file content, which is the output of the disabled tracked changes. Once we've updated the file, we then need to update the file properties to approved. So it's important that the update file comes before the update file properties, because if we update the file properties first and then update the file, it can overwrite the changes that we've just made to the properties. So just important to make sure that you have these in this order. And when we are updating the file properties, we are keeping ready for approval to yes, and we are setting the approval status to approved. We're then just sending an email back to the author of the document to let them know that their document has been approved. If the document is rejected, we're going to keep track changes on because more changes are going to need to be made to the document. And we're going to go ahead and update the file properties. We're going to change ready for approval to no, and then we're going to change the approval status to rejected. Changing this back to no stops the flow refiring, because if you remember from the trigger condition, the flow only fires when ready for approval is set to yes, and when the status is not equal to accepted. And then lastly, we're just sending an email notification back to the author again, just to let them know that the document has been rejected. So that's the second Power Automate. So in the solution today, we looked at 4 different Flowr actions. We looked at how you can automatically insert headers and footers, how you can automatically turn on tracked changes in Word documents, how you can automatically accept all changes in a document, and how you can automatically disable track changes in a Word document. All of these actions come from the Encodian Word connector. If you have any questions about anything you've seen today, please leave me a comment down below or get in touch with us at Encodian, and as always, happy automating.